Hi, everyone. My name is Steve Teresi. I'm the Senior Director of Technical Services here at JL Audio, and I want to introduce myself for you. I'm coming to you live from the main headquarters in Southern Florida, where we make all the great stuff over in the next building over. I'm joined today from Southern California, Mr. Rob Haynes. Please say hello, Rob.
Hi, everyone.
Fantastic. And from the frigid northern part of our country is Mr. Kevin Ferry, joining from the greater Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. Say hello, Kevin.
What's happening, everybody?
Fantastic. So Kevin's put together a really great session for you today on our functionality in Tune 4 called Autoset EQ to target. This is a nice little subroutine. I call it a micro automation that allows us to tune a given channel very, very quickly. And we just wanted to, show you guys how it works, how to make it not work, and what the real benefit behind this this tool really is. So I'm going to try to be quiet for a little bit and let Kevin take over and take it away, Kev.
You know what? Before we even get started, Steve, I want to. You said something earlier today that really hit home with me, and about this being an automation, not an auto tune, and that really was a big thing to me. And let's. If you want, you can interrupt, right? I want you to interrupt right when we're starting here. And because that was such a statement that was just very, very powerful to me, that really hit home in understanding kind of what's going on with this.
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and kind of expound a little bit on that.
Yeah.
What we did with Autoset EQ to target is taking the clicking behavior that a user might do to try to match a measured response to a target response, and we tried to take as many clicks away from them. But at the same time, we show full visibility of what's going on. The tools are in your hands. It is a tool. This is not intended to replace anybody, and it's not intended to be a one button does all. There are a couple of things that you need to do to make sure that it's going to give you the results that you're looking for. And most importantly, you have full visibility to the entire process before, during, and after the routine runs. And if you don't like it, just redo it or change it yourself. The controls are always available to you 100%. This is not a way of replacing you as the system tuner. This is simply a way of moving the little dots a little bit faster than maybe you could do manually. And I'll tell you, I'm going to let Kevin show you all of this stuff in the software. But what I do when I'm using Autoset EQ to target is I'll go ahead and run the routine the way Kevin chose, and I'm going to then look at it and see if I can maybe make it a little bit better by moving those sliders a little bit. And if I can make it better, great. If not, I get to scrap it and redo it again if I have to. It's that fast. It's that powerful. And again, it's not a replacement. Most auto-tune routines that we've seen, they try to do the entire system, and it's kind of like the little man behind the curtain that's pulling all the levers, and when it's done, he says, hey, it's all set. Do you know if it's right? Do you know if it's what you wanted? Does it hit the targets that you were looking for? Very often you don't know. So this is not what we're attempting to do. We're simply trying to make the clicking behavior of moving the little dots around and changing the values go faster to get you to an end result quicker. That's it. So there you go, Kevin.
It was just a really powerful conversation, and it really did kind of make sense. I wasn't even going to bring it up, but then when we were just sitting there, I was like, you know what? I'm going to put Steve on the spot for a second.
No problem. I don't think this audience is expecting anything different from me to get excited about something to do with Tune and Max. So.
All right, so let's get started. So today we are going to focus on that Autoset EQ functionality in Tune 4. Before starting, and this is going to be me up on my pedestal a little bit here, and before starting that EQ process, we need to make sure things like system design, proper install, initial configurations, polarity is checked. Your initial delays is another one to go in and make sure those things are set prior to getting into the EQ portion of it. And then after the EQ portion of it, there would be a little bit more of to-dos in there, including listen to it and maybe make some final delay adjustments or timing adjustments in there too. So, but listening to it is extremely important there. Using the Autoset EQ feature is designed for using Tune 4 and VXI or MVI amplifiers at this point in time. Now, you can use Tune 4 in simulation mode to see what that Autoset EQ would do for other products like a Tweak or other brands of processors on there. So you can go into simulation mode and run a simulation and see what that end result would be. But then you'd have to go ahead and transfer that over to whatever device that you're using, whatever DSP device that you are currently using on there. Now, this training, we're going to walk through some of the different aspects of that Autoset EQ so you can understand how to set up and run the Autoset EQ. And if you've hit any error messages or anything like that, we'll show you kind of probably what you may have run into. 95% of the setups are things that you're already doing when you're preparing to do a manual EQ. We're just trying to help you out and speed up that process and be a little bit more consistent with that end result there too. So that is what our Autoset EQ. It's a very helpful tool, like Steve mentioned. It is a tool for your toolbox, and it is not replacing you as the user. You are there to guide things along, and that is just there to help speed it up, save you some time, help with consistency, and it is not to be used as the end all be all. You still have to listen and maybe make some adjustments here and there as you go through. If you have not downloaded Tune 4 already, please go to the website, download it. Maybe Rob can throw up a link for it on there. I'm throwing everybody on the spot here today.
Who's got that kind of money, though, Kevin? How much does this powerful software cost?
It is free, and that's right. It is free. You can go in there and download it for free. So it's not going to charge you anything. The pocket lint you have in your pockets now will be able to cover that expenditure without any issues. So let's get started here. The first thing we need to do is select our targets to Autoset EQ to. We're auto setting EQ to a target, right? So we need to make sure we are selecting a target in there. And the nice thing is, in this free version of Tune, we've given a few different files with Tune 4 that include targets in them. And we've tested these targets, and we've gotten pretty good results with it. And there are a few other targets that are also included in there that you can go in and utilize too. Targets can be manipulated, or you can start from scratch and build your own, but that's a topic for another day there. So the nice thing is, though, if you are using the setup tool, which we do suggest to use the setup tool, a target file will actually be assigned based on the selected system design. So there shouldn't be any real necessity to go in there and change it. However, if you use the blank settings, or you used a different target file or you may need a different target file, you can go in there and grab them. And we're going to just take a quick real look on there and see what is offered as far as our targets go. This is a two-way target. It's great for all kinds of applications, even outside of the car audio world. When we take a look at home, you have a mains and a subwoofer. You look at marine products, you have mains and a subwoofer. But it works out very, very well. In car, it is great for passive networks, maybe coaxial systems, and anything like that, where you have a coaxial and a subwoofer, or you have a passive network with a tweeter, mid, and then a subwoofer on there. It consists of two driver-specific target traces, one for the mains and then one for your subwoofer, and then you can see the yellow summed trace on there. It's just the combined of those two driver specifics. The three-way system is most likely, probably personally, the most popular one that I think is going to be used out there, because it's a very popular system setup. And this is great for doing an active component system with separate dedicated tweeter and mid-range channels, along with a subwoofer there. So it consists of driver-specific targets for tweeter, driver-specific target for mid, and a driver-specific target for your subwoofer, along with your summed response in there. And then the big dog out there, if you're doing a very large system, is the four-way. And this is for those systems that are really above and beyond, really, really high-end. You're doing like a C7 three-way system and a subwoofer, for example. And it is the creme de la creme, utilizing driver-specific targets for tweeter, mid-range, mid-bass, and subwoofer, and is really, really help getting you dialed in there.
Kevin, I was noticing this when I was looking at the keynote earlier today, and maybe it was yesterday, but I look at the green curve there. You know, you got the purple, the green, and then the gray. The green curve doesn't even touch the yellow curve. And I thought that was interesting. It just proves that the target generator is summing all of those to the yellow line, which is the sum trace. So it's kind of interesting that the energy from the green is also augmented by the gray and the purple. So there's an interaction there, which when you're tuning to target, especially band-specific target, that's why it's so important to do the entire band instead of just the top part, because they will sum together and add energy into the sum trace. So I was just thinking about that. So sorry.
Yeah, if you just did it to the sum, Steve, you're right. You could end up with a little bit of weirdness between that mid bass and the mid range, or the mid bass and the subwoofer there. So by breaking it up and doing those driver specifics, you're going to get that nailed down a lot better for sure. Absolutely. Alrighty, so now we've selected our target that we want to go in and do. Now we're going to talk for a minute about the signal generator. Since we're not working with max and time measurements here, we're kind of sticking to that single microphone measurement with the free version and all of that. Time measurements at this point aren't going to really come into play. So the signal generator is extremely useful. However, it is not necessarily needed to take good measurements out there. You could use periodic pink noise from one of those silver drink coaster looking things if you have one of those. I don't know what that is anymore. I forget what they're called. but you could use something like that. One of the nice things about the signal generator is it has many different tones on there. Again, I'm not going to get deep into this because we will have another day for that. But the nice thing is that it does allow you to interject your pink noise directly from the computer into the system's auxiliary port if it has that. If it has an aux port, you can go directly in, and it's going to make it nice and easy to be able to go through and play there. And it will be real-time generation, and it's going to play out of your computer through the outputs and then into the system there. Now, if you don't have that ability to interject directly into it from your computer, we can actually go through and create a wave file from the signal generator. From there, we can go into the tune wave file folder and drop and drag that created wave file to a USB thumb drive and plug that into that OEM system or aftermarket system and play that pink noise or periodic pink noise directly from that USB drive. So even if you can't get it in there, it's still very, very useful to be able to go in there and create that noise for you. So use this signal generator. It is extremely, extremely helpful. And again, just another powerful tool for your toolbox there. So once we get that signal all set up and routed, now we're going to get into levels, and we're going to slow down a little bit here because now we're kind of talking about things and getting our levels set and how things should go. And getting the levels correct is probably the most detailed step, I should say, in the process, and it requires a little bit of thought in there. And you can raise the level way, 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 way above your target, and it will cut down, but it may not give you the end result that you're looking for. And if you have it on too low, maybe the process isn't going to work. So finding that happy medium to get that measure trace to match the target trace is going to give you the best results. So let's take a look at this. I'm looking at my measurement graph here with a microphone, taking measurements of just the ambient noise. This measurement is not even showing up on here on my graph. And I think it's 50 dB almost is what is visible in those from those targets there. So I can see this little arrow down at the bottom that I've circled in red there that is showing me I am taking a live measurement, but that measurement is down below off of the screen there. So what I can do is I can come up here to the top right to where my sound card is. And I can go in there and select that and actually offset the trace to bring it up closer to my targets. By positioning that measurement trace closer, I don't have to force my speakers to play overly loud to try to get them above that target trace and risk damaging any of the equipment there. So I'll go to the drop down. I'll come to my sound card that I'm actually taking my measurements with. and it's circled there in red. And then I will put a trace offset in there. I put a trace offset at 110 dB. There are ways to figure this out. If you want to figure out the scientific way, you can measure your microphone with a mic calibrator. Sometimes in the calibration files, it tells you exactly what that number is. You have to do a little math here and there, but you can get it from your calibration file on there too. Again, a story for another day there, getting your levels down in. So
ultimately, let me just jump in real quick. What we're trying to do is get the measured data in line with the target data. And however you need to do that, it's recommended. What Kevin's sharing with you is applying a trace offset to move that trace to a position close to where the targets are. That's the recommended method for many, many reasons. So we would recommend that you do that. It's sort of a combination. Put the trace in the general area of the target and then use your volume control, either on your source unit or on your slider. If you're using, in this case, you'd be using the VXI or an NVI amplifier to position the measured trace, as Kevin mentioned, and it's going to show you at or slightly above the same level of the target itself. That's ideal. Trace offset and level control using the volume control or the slider on the DRC. Those are the two ways of positioning it. Where it actually is almost not that important as long as it stays consistent throughout your measurements.
Yeah. All right. So now that our offset is close, let's start going in and taking some measurements on here. So I'm going to walk you through just kind of the steps. You can see up at the top hand of the screen, top right-ish of the screen, I've circled up there. I've pressed play on my signal generator. So I'm actually have my signal generator playing. Then I will come down and unmute my speaker there, or unmute my driver. I'm going to work with my mid-bass driver. And here's a little bit of just a little bit of a pro tip there. When setting levels up, I like to start with the mid-bass driver that is farthest away from where I'm taking the measurement at, because that's going to require the most energy at the listening position, right? So that is the best way to do it. In my office, actually my left mid-bass driver is the farthest away, so it kind of takes a little bit of weirdness into things because that one's usually closer to you. If you're here in the States, I should say, or you're driving a left-hand drive car there. So just keep that in mind to the one that is farthest away drive there. Over there. So.
It's not a right-hand drive, it's a wrong-hand drive.
So once that speaker is unmuted, I'm going to actually go and take my DRC and bring my DRC level up. And now I've brought my DRC level up to about 70%. You can see my measurement is now above that target trace. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen to this and make sure that speaker is not screaming for help and everything is playing very, very smooth. If you do find that the DRC has to be higher or that the speaker seems like it's struggling to keep that level, then feel free to apply a little bit more offset into that trace. So that way you're not going to damage any of the equipment on there or do anything that's going to be detrimental to the system reliability wise there. So feel free if you have to. What's that, Rob?
I was going to say, sorry, Kev. It's not just damaging the speaker potentially, but if we're overdriving the speaker, we have clipping, mechanical issues. Right. That's going to affect your response as well. Yeah. And we don't want to correct for stuff that the speaker isn't normally going to be playing. So,
yeah, absolutely. So now, once everything is set and our DRC is set and our levels are all kind of set and we kind of are where we are on that far mid-bass driver, now the levels that we want to utilize for the speakers are down in your output level trim. So if you need to turn a speaker down a little bit, like when you get to the tweeters and stuff like that, use your output level trim and bring that down. When you're done with the tuning process, you can click them and link them all together and bring everything back up. But as far as at this point in the process, bring everything down to equal out that mid-bass driver using your output level trim, and that will get you set up and ready to go.
It's a really good point you bring up there, Kevin, because essentially what you can do with the free version of Tune and your USB mic or external, XLR microphone, whatever the case may be, is if you do what Kevin just said, the two pillars that you can easily adjust with the free version are frequency response and level. And by doing what he just said, you're basically going to cover both of those at the same time, as long as you don't start adjusting your slider or anything else. If you're only doing channel by channel level offset by using the output level trim, as well as the Autoset EQ to target, when you're done with this, you're done with the two pillars that you can easily take care of with Tune 4. So that's really powerful, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you do accidentally move one, it's not the end of the world. You still do your Autoset EQ, but then when you're done with everything, you're just going to have to revisit the levels and get those levels dialed in with one another. So if you do accidentally bump your DRC or move something around that you didn't mean to, it's not the end of the world, right? So you can come back in and make your level adjustments at any point in time. But I personally am like Steve, do them all when you can and get it done with and move on.
Yeah, just move on. Anything you could quantify and get done fast, do it.
Right? Absolutely. So let's look at a few different scenarios here.
Pretty colors.
This is always when we start getting into the fun stuff here. Here we have a level that is too high, a level that is pretty close to the target trace, and a measurement that was lower in level than the target trace there. And I think Rob said it best when we said Red Riding Hood on this. So we're a little too hot, a little too cold, and kind of just right there in the middle of it. Now, I'm going to actually go through and run the process on these to show you what kind of the results would be if we are going through and doing the Autoset to EQ with this with these different traces here. I am going to start off with the one that was really close to the target to show you what it should kind of look like on there. Oh, sorry, was yeah, you're right, Steve. Steve says it was Goldilocks, not Red Riding Hood there. So my
bears,
bad.
Not wolves.
Right.
I clearly
Pigs,
don't know
bears, wolves, they all kind of get
details.
confusing.
Well, I was around when they wrote the story originally, so.
So
Kevin,
here I've
amazing
actually
what you're
gone
showing
through and
there.
I've Autoset EQ the level that was just right. The blue trace is the before I did the EQ, so that was what you saw earlier on the previous slide there. And then the white trace is our Autoset to EQ on there. So you can see we got a good result. We don't have a ton of energy that's been pulled out of it, and we can go in and we have a few bands of EQ that are left over. We can go in there and put some salt and pepper on there if we want to, make some adjustments on the filter types or whatever we need to do. We have the ability to go in there and make some changes at this point in time. So great result there. And it only takes a few seconds to get that result there. Now, I want to take the one that is too high. So here's the Autoset EQ to the level of that high measurement. Notice the correct level and the too high level. So their EQ down at the bottom there are the purple and white to the target traces. They're extremely close to one another. So we got a very good end result, but look what it took with the EQ cuts to get that end result. So there's a ton of EQ cuts compared to what it took on this earlier one up here, where it just took very minimal cuts. Got very similar results, but it is going to take significant energy out of that driver. And at the end of your process, you may not be happy with the output result on there. So again, going too high will give you a result, but that might not be the result that you're looking for in that in that final game.
Before you jump off that slide, I just want to point out for people that may not have used Tune software before, the orange kind of shaded area with the orange dots on it that are on the screen now, those are showing the controls for the EQ for a VXI amplifier or an MVI amplifier. In this case, it's VXI. And each one of those dots that's below the middle of the graph roughly is cutting energy out. And it does so by either a very fine cut, like you can see there's a fine cut right around, it's about 70 hertz or so. That's a really narrow thing. Yeah, exactly right there. That's pulling out just a little narrow bit of information, but it's a pretty deep cut. And then there's a whole bunch of other cuts that are varying degrees of wideness that is pulling a ton of energy out to bring the orange curve, the yellow curve down to where that grayish curve that's kind of obscured by the other measurements, where that target curve was. And what Kevin was sharing with us, that we have two results that are there. One that was done previously when the level is just right, and one that's done now with the level too high. And what he shared with us is the result is about the same. Yeah. But when you set the level too high, you're going to pull out so much extra energy, it's wasteful. So setting the level of your measurement closer to your target curve is ideal to get great results without castrating the system and pulling out too much energy. But what happens if we go too far?
I was going to just touch on something, Steve. If you're doing this to a tweeter and you're too far up, it's probably not going to be detrimental. You probably have enough level trim in there to make up for that adjustment. So if you've seen that and said, man, I still had enough level trim, it wasn't a big deal, you can do that on some of your higher frequency drivers. But when you start getting into a dedicated mid-bass driver, getting that level set becomes more important as you start going down the scale there. So just keep that in mind.
The positioning of that trace may come down to the level trim anyway. So that may be how you get the level too high to be level just right, is by lowering the output level trim. And that's a more efficient way of doing it than trying to beat it up with an EQ.
It is. Absolutely. So, like Steve was alluding there, we're going to go and try to do the one it is too low. So here the measured trace level is too low. It's below the target. By running that Autoset EQ now, an error is populated that we can see on the screen here. It says no filters no filters to optimize on there. The measured trace has to be closer to that target trace, just above the target trace, I should say. So you need to be above the target trace for that Autoset EQ to work properly on there. It will do some boosting if it is needed. So you don't need to get the entire trace above there, but you do need to have 90% of the trace above that target, and any steep dips or anything like that, it will try to compensate them.
It's a pretty smart routine that we've created here. It knows that a little bit of boost here or there is probably okay, but it's going to favor cut way more than boost. Like, it's not even close. So you see here, when the level's too low, it's not going to try to raise that level back up, because what if the driver can't do it? That's the big concern when you're doing something like this micro automation. The human should know better than the algorithm. So in this case, the algorithm is saving the human. So if you went too high, it's going to pull that energy out, no problem at all. But if you're too low, it's not going to try to put energy back into a system that maybe cannot reproduce it. So in this case, you would take this level and raise it up to the point where you want it. If you can't, it's a little bit outside the scope of today's presentation, but there are some things that you could do to get things to line up a little bit better.
Yeah.
And that's only if you don't have a system that can get to that level that's on the screen. But quite honestly, guys, if you don't have a system that can play 75 dB, we got another thing to talk about.
I heard Glenn has that issue. So
yeah, he does. He doesn't know how to make loud systems. So
all right. So just in general, finding the sweet spot is important. Use common sense, listen to the system, make sure you're not trying to overdrive anything, and get as close to that target as possible, and let the EQ system do its job, and you'll end up with great results on there. So now that we get our levels set, we want to go in and set our filters. So we want to go in and set our high pass and low pass filters. So here we can see my mid-range again. It just barely extends down as low as the target is there. So me personally, I'm going to actually, and I'm looking at this, and it is, if we take a look down at the bottom, I actually have 0 filters on this driver. So I'm taking a look at the natural response of this mid-bass driver, mid-range driver, and I see that it is just barely making that target curve. I'm a guy that likes to play it a little safe. So I'm going to go ahead and actually go in and change the target a little bit, and then apply my high pass and low pass filters on there. Since this is the driver that is selected, it is extremely easy to go ahead and make that change. I would just go into my targets, make my adjustments for my high pass and low pass filter. And you can see here now we've moved that crossover point up just a hair on there. So I can go in there and make my filter changes to my driver now. If you notice, the summed response didn't change. only the crossover point between my mid-bass or mid-range driver and my subwoofer did there. So now that my target has been adjusted, I can go in and set up my high pass and low pass filters. So at the bottom of the screen down here, we can see I've gone in, I've made some adjustments to my high pass filter. I just selected 24 dB Linkwitz Riley on both of them. And then I just brought my filter down on the low pass side and then up on the high pass side to get close to my target on there too. So we get them close on there and we can go through and make our adjustments now. So the next step after we get our filters set up here, I will go in and make sure that I am got my Z order correct. And the best way to explain the Z order when I think about it, and I'm old, so we'll see if Steve agrees with me, and Rob kind of shakes his head and says, what are you talking about here? But when I was in high school, we'd have like science class. And a teacher would have this big metal projector thing with a little glass that would kind of angle up there. And they'd have clear sheets, and they'd write on these clear sheets. And they'd set a sheet down, and then they would set another sheet down with more writing on it, and another sheet down with more writing on it. And that, to me, is how I think about the Z order. The way those sheets are laying on top of one another, you want to make sure that the top sheet is your measurement, and that is what is selected on there. And that's kind of how my brain kind of puts that one
overhead projectors, man. Wow. I was just going to use paper, right? I got 3 pieces of paper.
For the record, I did have those projectors when I was in high school.
Oof, okay. I like I said, I was just going to use paper where I have 3 pieces of paper. You want to make sure that the frontmost piece of paper has the data that you're looking for. If it's in the back, the system can't really see it. It doesn't know what you want to use. So you can't auto set EQ a target to a target. You can't auto set EQ a capture trace to a target. Well, you can actually, but not easily. So you want your live data, your actual measurement data, your microphone in this case, to be in the front of that Z order, the front of the overhead projector, the front piece of paper, whatever you want to look at it as. Just make sure that is selected. And what Kevin's about to show you is how to make sure that is the case.
Yeah, and you can see in the top right-hand corner there right now, my microphone and my measurement system is selected at the front of the Z order. There's 2 ways that you can go in there and do this. You can grab the drop down, or you can hit the Z key to be able to go through and do it. Here we can see that on now, some target is actually on the top of my Z order up in that top right-hand corner. If I try to go and take my measurement now, and I go ahead and pull up my EQ panel, and I select my Autoset EQ, with that target sum is at the front of the Z order, it's going to be unable to begin that calculation. Measurement data needs to be selected. So it's telling me, hey, there's not measurement data that is on the front of the Z order. You need to go in and select that measurement data. So I can go ahead and go in and select that measurement data and make sure that I'm taking my my measurement properly and I'm EQing with that measurement. So now, once we get our Z order all straightened up, now we're going to hop into how to use the Autoset EQ feature. I'm going to roll through this pretty quickly because I'm going to actually do this live for you guys when we wrap up here at the end. So I don't want to take too much out of it, but we are going to go through and do a driver, at least one driver, maybe 2, depending on how time is when we take a look at the end here. So the first thing we need to do is click the drop down in the upper right-hand corner to verify that our measurement trace is on the top of the Z order, or we need to look at it and then just verify that it is on there. Secondly, I'm going to come over to the drop down on the left-hand side and select that and select my EQ panel that you see on there. When I select that, it's going to pull up the EQ panel that is just populated onto the screen. And once that is on there, I can go through and designate what my output is, what my target is, and all of that good stuff. So starting off, I need to select what my output is. And this is the output of the amplifier. I'm going to auto EQ my left tweeter output. So that is what I want selected on there. Next, I need to go and select what target I want to match that driver to. In this case, again, I'm using my tweeter output. I'm matching it to a tweeter target. If you have used the setup tool, actually all of this has been done for you, and you shouldn't have to go through and make these changes. But if you didn't, then you have to go in and select which one that you want on there. So use the setup tool is the quick story there.
The moral of this
Once these are selected, select your Autoset EQ and you will be off and running there. So you select your Autoset EQ button on the right-hand side, and that will get you going. And you'll see this auto EQ calculation running screen will pop up for a few seconds. The funny thing is that when I tried to do a screen capture of this calculation runs so quickly on my computer that it was actually hard to screen grab. It took me about 25 times to get it as quick to go over there and hit run, go control or shift command 5, and then take my screen grab on there. So it is a very, very quick process to be able to go through. You'll see that auto calculation come up and run for you. And then when it is done, it will say EQ complete pop up and let you know that it is finished. And then obviously you can look at your measured trace. It's now going to be aligned fairly close with your target trace. And from here, you can go in there and make any of those changes that need to be
Kevin,
made.
I'm looking at the result there.
Close. What's that?
I'm looking at the result there, and I'm looking at the extreme right-hand side of the graph. It looks like the tweeter is way short of the target curve. Yeah, that part there. The reason why the algorithm does not try to boost that is because the tweeter's rolling off naturally there. And you're going to try to force it to do something that it probably doesn't want to do. And that's a waste of energy and a potential reliability issue. So we're not going to try to boost that. You're free to try if you want, but I'm telling you, it's probably not a good idea. And don't, all you sound quality guys, don't worry about that. The amount of energy that's up there is tiny. And the fact that the natural response of the driver is already rolling off, it's telling you that the EQ may not be the thing here. That may not be the solution. That's why we didn't try to fix it, because it's not really broken. So.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good. I like that my tweeter reacts that way to be able to show what not to do, I should say. Right. Let it do what it's going to do naturally, like Steve is. And it is a tweeter. I mean, we can make some adjustments to it. We could bring the level up a little bit and then EQ down some more. There are some things that you could do with it, but let it do what it's going to do naturally. Don't try to force it to do something that it doesn't want to do. So that's our quick Autoset EQ. We're going to get into some tips, tricks, and a couple little things here. And then we're going to go live and do a couple things here in the real live realm here. So we're going to start up just by selecting, we're going to talk about how to save bands of EQ here. So basically what we're going to do is, if you want to save a few bands of EQ for the end, you can go ahead and do that. So maybe you've run the Autoset EQ and it used every single band of EQ and didn't leave you anything left there. Well, maybe you want to have a couple left to make some minor adjustments on there. You can go ahead and do that and be able to do it. When I run it in my office, it actually leaves me 2 bands, just the way that the algorithm is, and it goes through and does things. On my mid-bass driver, on my tweeter, I think it leaves me like 6 or 7 bands, but on my mid-bass driver, it does use quite a bit more. So if I want a couple more bands to be able to go through and do that, on that EQ panel over there, you can see I've selected that little icon, and it turns off those EQs, and then it will gray them out in the top EQ across the graph there too. And that's just showing you that, hey, we're going to run this Autoset EQ, but we're not going to utilize those 5 bands of EQ. So let's take a look and see what our results kind of would be. So this would be our result running the Autoset EQ. The trace is still pretty close in there. Not quite as close as the 9 bands, but now we do have a lot of room for adjustments. 5 bands of parametric EQ will give you a lot of adjustments in there, and just showing you the comparison between doing the 5 bands and the full 10 on there, which ended up being 9 because it left the free one there for me. But just showing you the comparison to them, they're pretty darn close to one another. That algorithm really utilizes those parametric EQs to their full potential. You can see kind of in that what would we say there, like maybe 150 hertz range. You could do a little bit more with those extra bands of EQ, but very, very close to one another, and it gets it nice and dialed in. So if you don't want to use them all and you want to have a couple left over, you can go ahead and do that and give yourself some room for adjustment. Now, for some odd reason, if you accidentally click all of them or turn them all off on there, then you might see this where it just says unable to set up calculations because there's no available filters to go in and configure. And that's just if they're all turned off. If you accidentally hit the all off button on them, or you accidentally picked 5 and then went back and picked 5 more, and you turned all 10 of them off there. Probably not something that you're going to run into very often, but just be aware.
Kevin, there may be a situation that's related to this that'll cause the same error, to pop up. If you've already equalized the driver and you've used all the bands, in other words, if they're not at the 0 line in terms of the gain, if it's not at 0, the algorithm will see that as a used band and mark it as unavailable. So if you've already used all 10 and you go to run Autoset EQ, it's not going to destroy what you've already done. It's going to say, I got nothing left. But you could, like if you use, like Kevin showed before, if you use 5 bands and you manually adjusted it with 5 bands and then ran Autoset EQ to target, it would try to use the remaining 5 bands to make it even better. So it's non-destructive in nature. Which is a really nice thing. And again, it's complete visibility and complete control for you as the system tuner. This is not replacing you. It's giving you another tool to get it done even faster. Now, to go through and adjust 9 bands of parametric EQ to make it match that target, I don't want to say it's hard, but there's a lot of pointing and clicking and dragging, pointing, clicking and dragging.
Not
a lot
as
of stuff
fast
going
as
back.
Auto EQ.
Right. You're just not as fast as Auto EQ. That's the benefit of an automation, is not to replace you. It's to get you closer to where you want to be faster. And it remembers things that sometimes we forget. You may forget how much Q adjustment you actually have on a given EQ band, or how much cut you can actually apply. Oh, wow, I forgot I can really cut the hell out of this thing, or I can really get it narrow or really, really wide, whatever. The automations don't forget that. We're humans. We can forget. And the automations are really, really good at speeding that process up. Full visibility, full control, it just speeds it up for you. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other things, and this one's actually pretty cool. We kind of, let's see how to explain this. We kind of call this the cursor trick, right? And this is kind of neat in how you can go ahead and do this. And one of the other
time out.
Yeah.
This is an undocumented feature. So this is not going to show up in any of the literature that we put out there. This is just one of those things that's kind of back pocket. We hold this for people that give us the time and attention during our session. So this is a little hidden gem jewel here for you.
So being able to do this is pretty cool. And we'll show you exactly what we're doing and kind of give you an idea of why you would want to do that. But this will allow you to EQ or Autoset EQ in a certain frequency range. And we can do that by setting a cursor A and a cursor B to create a perimeter. And then anything inside of that perimeter will be what the Autoset EQ will go in there and actively EQ for you. So it's kind of nice. You're setting a left and a right, and then anything in between there will go ahead and utilize that Autoset EQ. So if you have, Steve brought up a good one earlier today, we were talking, if you have a lot of noise in your shop or something that's going on and you don't want to particularly mess with that area with the Autoset EQ, you can grab it from, 150 hertz on up, and where you're not having those noise issues, run your Autoset EQ and then go ahead and make some manual adjustments underneath there and fight that noise that you're fighting from the outside world there. So it's kind of cool. There's some different, very, very simple to use, actually. we'll come in and we'll go up to the top area here, and we will want to set a cursor A. So we come in and we set our cursor A. And then once that cursor A is set, then we'll come up and set our cursor B. So we've got our left-hand side, we've got our right-hand side. Now, anything I go and I do with the Autoset EQ will be done within those two areas there.
And just for a point of clarity, it's going to EQ the measured trace to the target. The EQ bands that are outside of that will be used. It'll pull them in to try to fix whatever's going on between those 2 points that Kevin just assigned. Now, remember what he was just sharing with us. If we lock out a couple of EQ bands, we could save those for later as well. And when you run it, look, I mean, it pulled a whole bunch of stuff into that one layer. And in that area, it's really, really good. But outside of it, it ignored all of that. It didn't even bother trying. So you still have 3 or 4 bands there that you can go and try to fix that on your own if you wanted to.
Yeah, and it's nice there because it did, like Steve said, it pulled it in there. And this was a great example of them sucking in there, utilizing that Autoset EQ and utilizing those bands on there. And you do have about 4 or 5 bands left over to be able to go in and make some manual adjustments on the upper or lower end of there. So it just kind of gives you a window, and it does your Autoset EQ within that window. It's very easy to set. You hit your set cursor A and you just click on the screen where you want it to go, set cursor B, and then you click on the screen where you want cursor B to go, and then that creates your perimeter and then allows you to do your EQing from when in there. So and this is just the Autoset EQ, and it just shows you without the data window being applied in there, so you can see where it would put all of those EQs across the board there, and then where our cursor A and cursor B would have been on there. So without those cursors on there, this is what our end results would be, compared to with the cursors on there being very narrow in that window there.
So real quick, just the act of going through and clicking the set A and then going down and then clicking set B, you could avoid that. I'm on my Mac keyboard, and it's command click with the left mouse click. And you could set those just without even taking your hands off the keyboard or anything. Just go ahead and click command click on the left. It sets A, command click on the right. Sorry, always left click, but on the low frequency, then high frequency, and set those cursors accordingly, and off you go. It's a very fast way of doing it.
Yeah, Steve is he's the keyboard shortcut guy there.
Anything to speed up the process, man.
I'm the guy with the paper that tells me the keyboard shortcut. It's printed.
I want to get back in the car and listen to it. You know, all this stuff. I used to love the tuning process, but I mean, if we've done this in the past, if you've gone through the process, it can take forever if you're just chasing your tail. You need to have a process. You need to have a pattern to your tune. You need to have a goal in mind. And my goal in mind is to get anything that could be measured, frequency, level, phase, time, all that stuff can be measured. Once the measured stuff is accounted for, the rest is subjective. In other words, it's up to our hearing to determine if it's right or wrong. And the only way you get to do that is the best part of tuning. It's sitting in the car and listening to it, making some minor adjustments in level and EQ, and then move on to the next car, or just go and drive and enjoy your audio system. You're done. But the anything that can be measured, any objective data that you can quantify, set a target and get there as fast as you can. So that's why I like the keyboard shortcuts, because I can move quickly and get out of that objective nature and into the subjective part, which is much more fun.
Yep, absolutely. And that's what the Autoset EQ is there for. It is to help you get there faster and more consistently on there. And it, like Steve said, and we've all repeated it, it doesn't replace you as the user. You have to guide the process. You have to have an understanding of what's going on there. Now, the nice thing is what's going on is stuff that you've all done manually. There's nothing magical or nothing behind the curtain that's happening. All of it is things that you have done to do those manual EQs. We're just trying to add that speed to the process to help you out there. So you're going in, you're setting your targets, you're setting your levels, filters on there, and then it is just going in and adding your EQ with that Autoset EQ very, very quickly. And so quickly that we're going to actually show you guys real quick. We've got a few minutes here. So I'm going to scroll over to my screen here. I'm going to actually be quiet on my side. I'm going to turn my my computer down a little bit, so that way when Steve and Rob or whoever's talking here, it won't come in. I'm going to start off. I'm going to do a tweeter here. I'm going to go up and change to 1/6 octave to do that. I'm using 16th first in, first out for averaging. So it's going to give me a pretty stable measurement when I finish talking and making noise over on my side. So we want to have that stable measurement. It is very, very important. If you're going too fast, then things might get a little cluttered for you. So I've set my levels. You can see my levels are set here. I do have my high pass filter set. I may make some adjustments just to show you guys what happens and how things will present themselves as I go through here. So I'm going to start off with the tweeter, and then if we want to go through and do the mid-bass driver, we can go, or the mid-range driver, we can go ahead and do the mid-range driver there too. All right.
I hear pink noise. He's changing his filter frequency to match it up a little bit better. And that looks pretty darn good. So now he's going to pop out his EQ panel by that drop down there. He's going to make sure that his output is the one he wanted, which it is. That the target is the one he wanted, which it is. So he's ready to mash that Autoset EQ to target button, and he hits it, and the calculation runs. It applies the filters, and just like that, it's done. It is that easy. That's a real-time demonstration of how easy it actually is. So when you change the banding, you're changing the resolution. The captured data is the same as what it was. And I'm sorry, the measured data is the same as what it was. It's just the resolution is different. Now, if you crank up the resolution and do the maximum banding that you can do, which is 1/48th, you'll see there's a whole bunch of jaggedness. At high frequencies, don't even pay attention to that. What Kevin did with the 1/6 octave is what I would recommend. I wouldn't even go to 1/12th. It's really not necessary. At higher frequencies, those variations that are so close to each other, you're not going to pick up on. But as you go lower in frequencies, you get into a mid-bass driver or a mid-range driver, you might want to go 1/24th or 1/12th or whatever the case may be, just to get a little bit more resolution at frequencies where it matters. That worked out pretty good there, Kevin.
And now we move to the mid-range.
So again, here he's adjusting the level of the driver using the output level trim from the. It's the same controls that you have in VXI tune software from normal. It's just conveniently located on the same graph. So now you can see the measured data, which is kind of slowly squiggling against the target. He's making sure the output and the target are correct, and he hits the button. It's going to apply whatever filters are necessary, and again, that's pretty fast, and it did a really nice job there. I'm looking, there's one place, yeah, so that he's toggling on and off the EQ. Right, there he goes, and now he's changed the banding, and he's running it again. And when that comes down, you'll see, again, it's done a really nice job. In that case, there was a little bit of boost put on there. 2 filters were boosted, again, because it saw some variation in those particular frequencies. And I think he's muting. So what he's doing now is he's capturing the trace. And you can do that by hitting the space bar and then typing in a name, or there's a button in the lower right-hand corner that says capture. You can click capture to do the same thing. We do recommend that you capture traces throughout the tuning process so you have something to go back and reference. It really helps when you label them too, because otherwise you'll be looking at, what was that? So
one thing to further on, just since we're talking about capturing traces, if you're a retailer and you're doing lots of cars, we have a default trace folder, but go in there before you tune and create a subfolder for the specific vehicle and system you're tuning. And that way you have captures for all the different cars that you can easily identify and look up or share or show customers as needed. But I would, capture pre-tune. If you're doing band specific, like we're doing here, capture the tweeter before you run any equalization, capture it after. You know, summed, no EQ, summed with EQ, and call it a day. Am I screwing up Kevin's measurements?
No,
Okay.
No, I was
Oh,
just
if
laughing
my
because
talking was messing up your with your microphone or something.
no, I capture a lot of traces. I was just showing that by pulling up my
look at all those.
capture traces.
So staying in that window real quick, you'll see that next to all those little colored rectangles, those are, you know, various captured traces that Kevin has stored. But you'll notice the icon next to them, it looks like a graph with a slash line through it. That means it's just not visible. You could toggle that and bring the visibility back and then turn it off just to clean up the display as you're going through the tuning process. So you can see some of the slides from earlier. He has all those traces still stored in here, so he could go back to them whenever he wants to. But to keep the graph nice and clean, we give you the option of toggling the visibility off. And if you wanted to, you could delete a trace out of the memory by right-clicking it. You have the option to delete a specific trace or clear all the traces. And by clearing them, you're not deleting them off the computer. You're just getting rid of them from this particular session. So you can always load them up again. At the top of the column there, you'll see a load button. You can go back in and load those from your computer again. And they're all stored in the folder. Like Rob was just saying, if you create a session folder, it'll be wherever that session folder is. You can go in and pull those back out and load them again at a later time. So these are just files once you capture them, and you do have the ability to change the color and do a bunch of other things to make those graphs look a little bit, the traces look a little bit different. But that's how you would manage all of that from that right-hand drop down. So thanks for showing that, Kevin.
It works. I mean, it just works, which is nice. You know, we talk about doing live demos and how you can get a little scary, but it's funny. It's just there's a comfort level here that you know it's going to come out right. Because it just works right.
It does work really well. But you know what? It's an algorithm. It's math, and it may see data points that may cause it to run into an issue. Who knows? Which is why we give you full visibility. There's nothing about this that's destructive or permanent. If you don't like it, undo it. Turn it off, reset the EQ, move the bands on your own. It doesn't matter. You can move bands and then run it. You can run it and then move bands. It just doesn't matter. This is not a replacement for what you do. It's a tool to get you where you want to be faster. Again, the goal is to get back in the car and listen to it. So the faster I can get you there, the happier I'm going to be, the happier you're going to be. And if it's a retailer doing it for a customer, the happier the customer is going to be. And that is really the goal here. And remember, everything you just saw is being done essentially for free. The assumption is you have a computer. You're watching us, you got something that can probably work, right? And the second thing is that you have some type of a microphone, a USB-based microphone or an external sound card with a microphone plugged into it. Because you've been probably tuning cars already, you may already have some of that equipment. So the software that allows you to do all of this is free. It is free. So.
Yeah. And you guys saw, I mean, I went through, cleared out a measurement, or the EQ, the Autoset EQ, changed my banding to a higher resolution, reran it. And that was less than a minute that it took me to go through and do that. And not only is the software free, but running that is free too. So don't feel like you do it once and you've committed to that.
You're using up your credits for the month, right?
Yeah, there was some chat just now about, not being able to afford Max. And remember, this is not a Max function. This is a Tune 4 function. So all of this with a $150 USB microphone, if not less. And you can do all of the auto EQ to target, the traces, all of that. That's part of Tune 4. Moving to Max just means you can do more stuff like the 5 mic averaging for the RTA, phase, and all the stuff we'll talk about in the future.
True transfer functions and things of that nature. Yeah, Max takes everything to the max. It takes it to a whole new level. Everything you saw Kevin do today, of course, you can do that. And there's many other tools that come with the hardware that we're offering with Max. And we know Max is not something that's within everybody's price point, but it wasn't really intended for that. It's intended as a tool for those that are doing this pretty regularly or are very, very committed to system tuning. So I know there's a number of consumer level people have no other way of really putting that. You're not a dealer, so you can't easily buy a Max system. You have to go through a retailer to buy that, but you're tuning a lot of systems, and in that case the investment in Max may actually be worth it because that's part of what you are doing regularly. For a retail shop, of course I'm a little bit biased, but I think this is an incredible tool to invest in. not because of what Kevin just showed. There's always that, but you can technically do that right now with a mic that you may already have. But there's so many other tools that you can use from within Max, and the expansion of Tune 4 with Max allows even more measurement. So it is definitely worth it for a shop that does this for a living. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Josh wants it to cook breakfast for him. It's good, but not quite that good. Just for the record, while Kevin was talking, I saw Rob answered one of the questions of where do you find all the keyboard shortcuts. I wanted to remember where that was, so I launched Tune on my other screen over here, and I'm just using my built-in microphone. I'm not saying to tune a car this way, but I don't have a mic plugged in, and I'm taking measurements right now. So it's and the location for that, by the way, I know Rob mentioned he's going to do a Help Center article on it. There's a preference gear on the main screen of the interface. If you click that, what opens up, there's a button that says show shortcuts. And if you click that, it's even printable. Yeah, Kevin, if you don't mind going to it, the gear, bottom left. Right? And the bottom, there you go, right there. If you click on that, there's all these shortcuts. And there's an option on the bottom there to print that list. And Kevin showed you what that printout looks like. I'm going to hold it up again. So it prints a nice alternating shading for easy readability. So you could actually print it out. What we envisioned was people would like print that out, laminate it, and toss it in the toolbox and forget they have it. But the idea is that you have a reference card. So, what other questions came in, Rob? Did we cover them?
I think I pretty much got all of them. There was you probably could answer this one, Steve. There was a question from Evan. Is there any chance there will be a Max Lite that is somewhere between Max and using a USB microphone with Tune 4?
Easy. It took a long time to do what we've done. So, Evan, it's a really good question. And, the truth is that a lot of the people that were involved in this project are really very happy about what we've put together. We wanted to make a tool that we would use on a regular basis for our purposes and share that with retailers and consumers that would be interested in such a tool as well. And during that process, as we kind of studied and learned and came upon other ideas, we have talked about other versions that we might be able to offer. And when we did the launch, I do remember saying that this is a new category for JL Audio. It's not just a new product. This is not the end of this, or certainly not our intent for it to be the end. I don't have any specifics for you, Evan, but the goal is that we would like to continue to offer tools that retailers and consumers could value from JL Audio. Honestly, it's hard for us to make tools to compete with people that make tools for a living. Like, we're not going to make wrenches. We'll let Snap-on deal with that because they're really good at it. But tools that are related to audio and sound, those are something that we do have some skills for. We have lots of talent on our team that can develop a lot of those projects. It's about allocation of our time and resources to make that happen. And this one took about 3 years, so we kind of want to recover a little bit. But just know that this is a new category, not just a new product.
And keep in mind that this is a really, really nice measurement system that happens to work really, really well with VXI and MVI amplifiers and shortly down the road Tweak also. But it is a measurement system. You do not have to use it just with those products. You can use it strictly as a measurement system also. And that's very important to understand.
Thank you to Jeffrey Hald for making it clear I missed a couple of questions as well.
So while Rob scrolls for that, I see that Glenn was asking about an oscilloscope functionality to Max. Our session today was really on Autoset EQ to target, which is not a Max specific feature. That is part of the free aspect of Tune 4. However, Kevin has completed the presentation and we're in the Q&A portion, so I don't mind taking Glenn's question while I buy Rob a little bit of time. Yes, we do plan on offering oscilloscope functionality. I do have questions about what you might need that for. There are some applications for it for sure. There's also an ability to take impedance measurements. So a friend of mine was looking for one of these guys, a C5 mid-range, and I happened to find one covered in dust in the back room, and I wanted to make sure it worked. So the easiest way to do that is take an impedance measurement. So I did, and it does work. So yeah, there's lots of things you could do with Max oscilloscope and impedance measurements. Impedance you can do now if you have a Max. You can do that now. The oscilloscope functionality is being cooked right now, and the oven is hot and it's coming. So
all right, so hopefully this is what Jeffrey was talking about, but he was asking, what if you saved 3 PEQ bands, ran auto EQ, then instead of using the last 3 bands by hand, set limits A to B with the cursor trick Kevin was showing, and then rerun the auto EQ for just that area? Those 3 bands, I would imagine, would only auto set EQ in that specific region, correct?
That is correct. Yep. That's the way it's intended to work. Yep. 100%. Very good thinking, Jeffrey. It's a good tool to use for that. I would argue that maybe if it's only 2 or 3 bands, it may be faster to try to do that manually after the auto set did the heavier lifting. But it could be fun to do that. And again, like Kevin was saying earlier, auto set EQ is free. Just mash that button again. That's no big deal. And you could turn on and off filters whenever you want. So.
I honestly thought we were talking about Jeffrey's other question here that says, what happens if your keyboard is broken and you can only click? Do you go to Best Buy for a new keyboard or do you tune anyway, Steve?
These are the questions that keep me up at night. Obviously, most of the stuff can be done with a mouse, but I like the keyboard. I like being able to sit there and kind of fly around with the keyboard shortcuts. There's some contextual things like you hold down the command and you click on something, and then you can right click on things. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do with a combination of a mouse and a keyboard, which is why I like actually having a tuning cart that I can have a separate mouse and keyboard. Yes, you can do this with a laptop. I just find the act of doing a lot of this stuff on the trackpad on the laptop not as fun. It's not as easy to work with. However, when I get into the car and I'm doing minor adjustments like on level or some minor EQ changes, that's fine for me. It's the heavier lifting stuff. I want a dedicated keyboard and mouse. It just makes life a lot easier.
Even with Tune, I actually find myself using keyboard shortcuts, and I'm not a keyboard shortcut guy, but like the Z key to change the Z order, I can run through that very, very quickly rather than going up to the drop menu. C for coherence when I'm using my Mac system to be able to turn that off and on. And there's a few others in there.
Don't forget the V key. The V key is one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're what the V key does, if you're looking at something that the averaging is slow, so it's the graph, the live data doesn't update quickly, you hit the V key and it updates immediately. It basically purges the queue and starts over again, so you don't have to wait for it to average out. It immediately does that. So if you change averaging, hit the V key, it snaps right to where you need to be. So.
Yeah, he put the obvious one that I wouldn't even have thought as a shortcut key, but the space bar for capturing traces. Yes, I use that one every single time.
Right. So I did see the question. I think Rob is intentionally trying to avoid it. Is regarding mic calibrations. So there's a lot to be said about mic calibrations, and I'll tell you the most important aspect of mic calibrations for the purpose of what you'll be doing with most of this stuff is the level. It's going away from when Kevin was talking about doing trace offset to get the live data on the same screen as the target data. The target data by default is going to be positioned anticipating a dB SPL scale. But since we don't know what microphone or sound card you might be using, we cannot calibrate your microphone for that level. So by default, it's going to show up as dBFS or full scale, which means the level is going to be way, way down compared to SPL because you need an offset value. Most mic calibration files that you're likely to find will give you an offset value as part of the TXT file that comes with that microphone. That value is based upon a standard mic calibrator file. And in this case, if you buy a standard mic calibrator, there's a test tone that's played out of this, and there's an option to play it at 94 or 114 dB. Yes, it's loud, but it's a tiny little speaker in there. If you don't have one of these, they're about $100 here in the US. If you don't have one of them, the 94 is the common one. So you apply that offset value to 94. And that's what Kevin was saying earlier, or maybe it was Rob. Is a little bit of math. So you take the 94 and you add the offset value, and now you know what number to put in the trace offset to make your scale dB SPL. And that's great. And I would recommend doing that. Most people are looking for a mic calibration file for deviation and frequency response. And I looked at the file that I have for my mic that I have here. And the only place it starts to deviate by more than about a dB is above 10,000 hertz. And it's a 1.5 deviation from 10,000 to 20,000. That's nothing compared to some of the things that you're going to deal with in the car, and I wouldn't even worry about it. But the level offset is very powerful. And having said all of that, that brief rant that I went on, we are working on ways of loading in calibration files. The problem that we run into is there are so many different formats, it's very difficult to account for all of them. So just know right now you can use your calibration file to do the level offset to do dB SPL instead of full scale, and that's by far the more important.
Did we bring up the O-scope question?
We talked about it, I think.
Yeah, so Glenn mentioned
I see there's still some comments about it.
Yeah, level setting other amplifiers. There was conversation about using it to repair amplifiers from Josh Collins.
It's true.
So there's definitely uses for it, and it'll be a nice addition.
Yeah, I think for normal system tuning, an oscilloscope is not quite as valuable as some of the tools that you may already have for free right now without having to get a Max. But when you want that higher level functionality, yeah, the Max is going to be able to do that. It sees it kind of like the same way as it sees a mic input. So you don't need a BNC connector or anything like that. You can use the XLR connectors that come on the Max unit. And that's no problem. You can even use the RCA level input if you wanted to do that. It's just a way of capturing a measurement, and it'll perform the right transfer function or routine on it in the oscilloscope. So all good.
Question from Jeff Smith.
I know
he said
him.
earlier that Kevin mentioned adjusting the filter type and slope to achieve the target response. Is this process done separately per side or in stereo pairs?
Yes.
Really, you can do it any way. I know in my car, when Nick did my car, if you look at my Tune project files, and he tuned my car with Smart before we had Tune 4 and Max, but it's not stereo. I have different filter frequencies on my mid-bass, on the different side mid-bass drivers, the mid-range drivers, and it was really all to match up. Obviously, like Kevin showed, what the woofer is naturally doing, but also to help with the phase response at the listening location, which in my car is the driver's seat. So, because I don't care about anyone else in the car, got to sound good where I'm at. So it really depends, I guess, what the end goal is. You can do it in pairs. If you're going for that highest level of detail, get the time domain really tight, you may need to stray a bit. It really comes down to what the end result needs to be.
Keep your slopes and types the same. The frequency can vary a little bit here and there on it. But what I normally say, and this is we have this conversation quite a bit, is let that target guide you. Don't
let the
worry.
data be your guide.
Yep. Don't worry about the numbers as much as matching the target and just making sure the speaker's not doing something that it shouldn't be doing. So let that target guide you and roll.
I often do blind tuning, which is probably a really bad way of looking at it. But so long as you don't do anything crazy, like try to cross over your tweeter at 200 hertz, again, let the data be your guide. Watch the trace as you're making these adjustments. Normally, to specifically answer Jeff's question, normally I'll do a left channel and then I'll do a right channel. And as long as I'm matching up the acoustic response to the electrical target, and there's a distinction there, the electrical target versus the acoustic response, they can be different. Kevin's recommendation of keeping the slope and filter tight the same is a good one because of the way the two will sum together. The electrical filters will sum together better. But again, if you're matching up to that target, don't worry about it. You will be able to see all of that in the time domain once you get a Max unit and have the ability to see some of that. If you don't have visibility into time, Kevin's suggestion is a really good one. Try to keep them lined up so that summation is going to be pretty much in sync in terms of time.
Here's a question that I feel like came out of home audio. What if my deck has an auto setup? Should I run that before running Tune or just leave the deck settings alone?
That's an excellent question, Brian. It's a tricky one to answer. I haven't found auto setup routines to be particularly effective at making systems truly sound good. They do certain things well, but it seems like most auto routines, they hate subwoofers. They castrate the sub for reasons too involved for us to get into tonight, but I have found that it's not the best thing to do. However, most of them, like our auto routines, are free to run. So go ahead and run it and see what it does. You'll be able to measure the before and after of whatever they've done. And if you like what they've done, then you're done. If you don't like what they've done, then you could start doing it on your own. You might find a combination of what they've done and what we can do, or what you can do as the system tuner, may be the best result. A lot of those auto setup routines, if Rob's guess is correct, and this is a question that comes from maybe a home audio system, where they're factoring in some amount of distance for some time compensation. Without a max unit, you may not be able to see that, but that may be the only concern, that the auto setup routine might do something funky with the time domain that you may not have full visibility of that. You may see the result of that in terms of summation, but you may not be able to see what they've actually done. Hopefully that helps, Brian. It may be a bigger question than what we can answer tonight, though.
Yeah, I remember like a lot of those old. There was a joke I was just going to say, like the old Pioneer PRS units had some auto, DSP functionality. But I mean, if you have a standalone DSP, you don't want filters on filters on filters. I would imagine if you had a VXI, a Tweak, or some other standalone DSP that has more functionality than what your source unit has, leave it alone. Use the more powerful DSP. Right. And call it. It's just like if you're using a DSP and standalone, you're not going to set filters on your DSP and then set filters on your analog amplifier. You want to defeat those, so we only have one filter. So we want to keep it as simple as possible. Too many interactions amongst filters, whether they're on separate devices or one, can cause phase issues in the car and other problems we don't want to run into. So keep it simple. And same thing, like if it's in the home world, if you have on your home theater system, the auto setup, or if you have it for a closed system and you're adding a subwoofer, they'll say, hey, our speakers aren't going to play that low, so we're going to kill all the bass output, and now your subwoofer doesn't perform the way you want it to. So you got to just figure out, what you have in there. And if you have multiple, use whatever's going to give the best results and leave the other one alone.
And going back to Kevin's statement, let the data guide you. So Rob's talking about the interactions of multiple filters can get kind of squirrely. So minimize, use the more powerful one, and let the data guide you. So if the standalone DSP external to the system is better, and you use that and you get results that you're looking for, and the data verifies it, you're done. This is not about you have to use our stuff. Use whatever tools you need to get the system to sound good.
Yeah. The other thing is, if you start using them from multiple spaces, you use something from here, something from here, something from there. When you go to make a change, where do you make it at?
Where do you make the change? Right.
Yeah. So keep it simple, like Rob said. Stick to one. Use whatever you have is most powerful, and roll with that one, and go on.
And to further just show the versatility of Tune 4 and Max, especially with Max, but it's not just for car. Glenn Savage just mentioned he used Max with his B&K components receiver, JBL towers, and it was a whole new way for him to tune his theater room. So, I know we focus a lot on showing this in the car because we have that tight integration with VXI and MVI and Tweak to come in the future. But remember, Max itself and Tune 4 on the measure tab, it's a measuring device. So, remember, it's not just for tuning a VXI or MVI amplifier. It is to take professional level measurements, whether it's 12 volt, whether it's marine, I guess marine audio is 12 volt, whether it's home audio, pro audio. That's why it does cost what it does. Steve alluded to earlier, we didn't make this for everyone. We made this for the professionals that are looking for professional grade measurements. And that means anywhere. So home, car, marine, pro, think about Max as a tool to get you to that next level.
That's right. 100%. So the trick to speak into that a little bit further is the DSP controls that we have access to at home, ironically, are a little less than what we have on a lot of mobile audio systems, which is, again, we have, like Rob mentioned, the tight integration with our own DSP, but we're flexible enough to take data, we'll display data from others and give you information on how to adjust another DSP, whether it's a JL Audio DSP or not. So you'll get that feedback from the measurement, and you could adjust it any way you'd like. And earlier I mentioned that the auto tune thing is very often the man behind the curtain. And these auto setup routines, you don't know what they've done. You can't see where they started and where they finished, or what algorithms they use, or what equalization had been applied. You only see the before, and maybe you see the after, but there's nothing to see. Well, what did they change? And what if you don't like the result? You got to run it again. But if it's a consistent device, you run it again, it's going to do the same thing, and you still don't know what it did. So that's why I said, with some of these auto routines, they tend to kill the sub, and that could be a number of different things that they've done to kill the sub. But I have no visibility to that until I start taking some very detailed measurements and realize that maybe I should do what Rob said and undo that and use a tool that I can actually control.
I guess we don't do good job most of the time because Jesse said we're doing a great job today.
Don't be so surprised. We're trying here, So what's funny about it is we had this new tool. Tune 4 is a new tool, and there's so many different things that Tune 4 can do. And we want to tell you all of it, but there's just so much. We're already going on almost an hour and a half on this one. We know that you guys are thirsty and hungry for this information, and we do want to share it, but we want to prepare it in a way that it makes sense and it helps answer the questions as thoroughly as we reasonably can. But know that this is a huge conversation. System tuning, I make it trivial by saying if you can measure it, target it, and address it. That's really all it is. But knowing how to do all of that takes a little bit of time, and we will unfold that and continue these conversations as we go forward. The exciting news that we have for you today is that the Max units have started to ship. As a matter of fact, we're waiting at any moment now. Someone's going to be opening one up and taking video of it. We're dying to see
I'm waiting for that Facebook post.
Because I got to tell you, somebody told me that they've opened one, and the way it looks is really much better than even the beta stuff that we did. And I haven't had a chance to see that yet, so I'm dying to see what it actually looks like. But that means that we'll start doing some conversations about what Max can also do. We've been focused on what's currently available to the marketplace in the free version of the software using an existing microphone, a USB mic or whatever. So that's the intent here. We've been trying to roll out training sessions that you can execute right now if you have a microphone. Then now that Max is coming out, we'll start using training rigs like the one I got back here and showing live demonstrations of what Max can actually do. Now that somebody out there can actually do that, other than the beta group, you guys are special. So
I do have to admit, seeing the picture yesterday of Nick, of all people, who really is the mastermind behind all of this, taping up the first package Max to go out. I mean, that's got to be like sending your kid off to college.
Oh, it's gotta be.
I don't know.
I have enormous pride, and I didn't do that.
Right, but here he is. I remember when, pre-VXI, us starting to talk about what could we do to further integrate into VXI amplifiers when they come out. This was like maybe a month before we had the big VXI announcement a couple years. That's how long we've been working on this. And that was the first time we saw Nick using Smart, and all of the things he's thought about and wanted to do to finally be like, I'm sending the first one out and I'm taping the box. That had to be the coolest feeling for him. I was so happy to see that picture.
Yeah, me too. We're just excited, guys. It's
right.
I know it can sound like a little weird that the factory guys are all jazzed up about a product that we make, but you got to remember this is different than like a VXI or a W7. This is a measurement tool, right? It's a way of tuning a system, which is obviously, as I've mentioned before, this is a new arena for us. We're not new to this, mind you, but we've not made the tools before. We've used other tools, and Nick was able to put all of this together. Obviously using our engineering team and a lot of other supporting cast, but this was his brainchild through and through. So we're just excited, really excited to get this to the marketplace. I know you guys are going to do great things with what we've offered. I know it. So
yeah, it is exciting, especially coming from a install background, man. It's just, if I had this 15 years ago or 20 years ago, oh my gosh, it would be...
Now, here's the crazy thing. The technology, behind this, the what Max is going to offer in Tune 4 with Max is its transfer function measurements. This is not new. This is not something that we invented. This type of stuff has been used in pro audio for decades, but we've always been told that it doesn't apply to mobile audio, and that's just not true. It just hasn't been applied to mobile audio. We've been using tools like a standard RTA to get pretty darn good results. This is just going to take that to a whole new level. And, you know, I kind of wrote it over here. It's about time, you know, and it's pun intended, right? It's about time we started using tools like this, and these tools are going to measure time. And that's a really important distinction of what we've been doing and versus what we can be doing. And what we can be doing, it's not new. It's just new to this industry. So we're excited about that. We get them all?
We got them all.
They're asking what I did to your hand. Don't piss me off. That's what I did to his hand.
From 2,500 miles away.
Hey, you know, I'm like, what is it, Thor? Thanos, right? Anyway, so I think we're good. Are we done, guys?
I think so.
We are.
Fantastic. We went
It's
long,
about
but
that time.
Good dialogue. Obviously, very excited about this. We got more stuff coming. Next week, we're taking the week off. We have this little holiday around some birds and stuff like that we're going to enjoy. But the following week, we're going to work on a new session that we haven't done before. And then 2 of us are going to be headed to the Dallas Knowledge Fest. And that would be the following week after that, if I remember right?
I think it's December, the weekend of the 10th or 11th in December.
Yeah. Right. So you guys have a solid week and a half or so to work on any questions that you may have for us. The next session we do, depending on how things go, it'll either be a live tuning session or it'll be a guide through a tuning process and how automations can be your friend. So that's kind of the working story at this point. But then, you know, Rob and Kevin will be unleashing Tune and Max at the Knowledge Fest. So without further ado, I'm going to say thank you for watching and good night, and we'll see you next time.
Good night, everyone.
Take care, guys.